everyone. My name is Evie Lupine, and welcome back. Today, we are back again with another very special interview. This one is actually, I think it's my first international interview. We are here with June Lovejoy. She is in Japan, and we are here to talk about the sex industry in Japan and kink and BDSM and her YouTube channel and all sorts of fun stuff. But before I start rambling into all the topics we're going to cover, would you like to introduce yourself to the audience, June?
I would love to. Thank you so much for having me, Evie. So, my name is June Lovejoy, and I am a JV actor or actress in Japan. And that's basically like a fancy way of saying porn actor.
Mm.
And I've been in the industry for 2 years, and I've been living in Japan for over seven. And originally, I'm from America, but I moved to Japan in my early 20s and worked as an interpreter and a translator. And what else? I do movie producing, voice acting, VTubing,
Mm.
all sorts of things, but I'm mostly known for the naughty videos and and you're more than welcome to watch them, but you don't have to. So
Well, I am so fascinated. So I guess actually first question, because so for people that watch my channel, they probably know this, but I'm
Mhm.
asexual, so I don't
Okay.
like for porn or anything like that. Like I'm just like whoosh, like I like
Yeah.
hentai. I'm a little bit familiar with, but anything besides that, I'm like no frame of reference. So this is very
Okay.
much like like let's talk about this. So what does JV actually stand for?
Okay. So
Hmm.
Japanese adult video.
Ah, oh, okay, I see. So J, okay, that makes sense. So you started out as like an interpreter. It actually kind of sounds sort of similar to what I want. Actually, when I was in college, I originally planned on being an ASL translator, and then I changed completely into something totally different from that for
Yeah.
various reasons. But I'm sort of curious, like, one, what got you into translating, and then after you went to Japan, what caused you to switch from translating to a different career field?
Oh, great question.
Mm.
So the reason why I went into translating or interpreting is because I love Japan.
Mm.
I love Japanese, and even now, I use this feeling in my current work and on my current platform. But I dislike misinformation, and I see even to this day a lot of
Mm.
translations are incorrect. Like they don't really understand the culture or the nuances of Japanese culture, and then they just directly translate. And I see that a lot in
Mm.
like fan dubs, and no shame to them. Great. Back in the day, we didn't have like Crunchyroll or any of those official translations like Netflix, but I really disliked all of the incorrect translations out there, and I was like, I think I can do better. Not to be like narcissistic, but that was
Mm.
a big drive and I also studied Japanese Sign Language, so that's so cool that we have a
Oh,
connection there. Yeah, that
interesting.
is
Wow. It's so I people also think isn't sign language just like the universal language for all
right.
deaf people, and I'm like, no. There's like people who like
No,
live in a farm on like a small island somewhere, and they have
yeah,
their own sign language. Like it's all independent. But in any
it's
case,
so
that is
beautiful.
so interesting. So getting into translating and like the fan dubs and everything, I totally relate to that. Actually, we talked about this on the video we did for your channel, the video that Aki
Yeah.
Dearest did with Doyama Tessen, where she was tied
Mhm.
up and did shibari and stuff with him. Somebody told me that one of the translations actually was incorrect, and
Mhm.
actually it caused me to have an issue with something he said because I thought that he said that
Oh.
the she was doing a takata kote, right? So she was doing like the
Hmm.
box tie in the back, so like
Hmm.
this kind of a deal.
Right.
And he described it as being simple was the translation they went with, and
Mhm.
apparently the word he actually said means more like basic or fundamental as opposed to
Right.
simple. And I was like,
Kihon. Yeah.
oh, that totally changes it because thinking in English, like the
Right.
connotation of saying that simple is like the box tie is actually very dangerous. It's quite
Easy. Right.
complicated to tie,
Right.
and so I was like, I didn't really say it's simple. But it turns out he did actually. The word he actually meant was fundamental or basic, but they translated
Right.
it to a different like interpretation of the word, and completely, I would not have had that
I
comment
love
had it
that.
not been translated that way. So there you go.
Yeah. I again I have that all the time because there's not a lot for my own industry, the JV industry, there's not a lot of information out there in English.
Mm.
And even if it is, it's like just translated by good old Google Translate. So I think it's dangerous with stuff that's
Mm-hmm.
related to human sexuality or play. Again, like simple, someone's like, oh, this is easy box tie, and they can get hurt or hurt their partner. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, very, very dangerous. But to answer the other question that you asked in your first question, why did I switch over from interpreting to sex work? And this is so like an answer. Every time I give it, I feel like I'm making sense, but sometimes in the comments they're like, that doesn't make any sense.
Mm.
But I worked for a really, really bad company for 2.5 years. It's a very
Oh.
famous company. I cannot say the name, but it
Mm,
was my dream company. And I got treated very poorly, but I thought,
mm,
oh, it's because I'm a foreigner. Oh, my Japanese just isn't good enough yet. But now looking back, no, it was just a really corrupt company. People would get like sexually harassed. There would be like issues morally.
mm,
Um, I did not feel like a human. And honestly, I was like, I'm ready to just end it all. And when I looked around at other work, I would always be kind of anxious, like, oh, what if this is just as bad? Like, why can't I work on my terms? And
mm,
I've always been a very sexual person. I love human sexuality with all my heart. I love sharing that. I love telling people that it's okay to be sexual and it's okay to engage with consent, with,
mm,
with play as adults with other adults. And I felt like I could do that through pornography because I studied acting for 8 years when I was in
oh,
America.
mm,
Yeah, through high school and college.
mm,
And even though that wasn't in Japanese, and people sometimes think that acting skills aren't necessary in porn, it is. It really
mm,
is.
yeah,
Um, and that's just why I went in. I thought about maybe going into like escorting, or there's something in Japan that we have where like there's tons of different kind of sex stores.
mm,
Um, like there's something called Soap Play and all on like Soapland. But
mm,
I just thought like I was really scared of getting like attacked or being in an unsafe environment, not being
mm,
able to pick you can't pick your customers, right? For the most part when you're starting out.
mm,
And also I was very afraid of catching an STD. So I went with pornography because everything is decided and you know in advance who is coming.
mm,
You show each other your STD checks and there's contracts. There's a lot of paperwork involved.
mm,
So I felt like I could enjoy myself and my sexuality in a safe environment and also do things on my terms,
mm.
which was really important to me at the time.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I can totally understand that coming from a background where you felt disrespected and were disrespected by a company
Yeah.
for years and it was your dream place you wanted to work. And it's like, oh my gosh,
Yeah.
well, what? Why wouldn't I just work for myself or get to dictate what actually happens to my body as part of my livelihood? Totally get that, especially along with
Thank
the
you.
sentiment of, wanting to help people with sexuality and I totally get that. So I do know a little bit about like sex in Japan from having researched it
Okay.
because I go down like research like rabbit holes like the soap land stuff I'm familiar with. But
Good.
what is interesting to me, gosh, there's so many things I could ask about. I'm kind of curious about, well, we don't have to get into this in detail, but my understanding is that like sexual harassment laws in Japan are not
Okay.
very robust. Is that accurate? Like my understanding is it's basically like they're not really there, and like the only thing that constitutes like genuine sexual assault is like a penis going in a vagina. Like, is that basically how it is, or is it a little bit more comprehensive than that?
I've always found I will be completely honest, I'm not going to pretend to know things that I don't.
Mm,
I don't know the exact laws. I would just say that like for example, we have a problem with like people on trains touching
yeah.
women inappropriately, right?
Mm,
Um, and I always think that if this happened, like, because Japanese people ask me, like, do you have that problem in America? And I just say, no, because the people on the train would kill that man. Like, he would not get off the train. But in
mm,
Japan, people pretend not to see, and therefore it's not
ah,
their problem. So even if they see it, or like someone like that, the girl or the woman is just like, please, someone help me, like stop, or she's like crying or something, they will
oh,
look away. And I personally
mm,
experienced that on the train. I will say that the police are. I see that a lot. People say like, "Oh, Japanese police aren't very helpful," but I've been like
mm,
assaulted and like assaulted on a train and off in Japan, and the police
mm,
were always very, very helpful and very thoughtful.
mm.
Um, and they'll like assign a woman and stuff. But as far as the laws go, I would say that they're probably not as great as the ones in the West. But for example, I was once assaulted near my house just taking a walk,
Mm,
and all the guy did was like well, all the guy did sounds fucked up, but like there wasn't any like penetration or anything. All they did
mm,
was like grope me and like touch me and hold me down and stuff. But the police were very adamant about finding him. So I
ah,
don't I just feel like again, I don't know the laws and I wish I did because your question's very it's a very good question.
mm,
But in my own experience, I felt like the police were very helpful. And so I feel like they wouldn't go that far if there wasn't anything to prosecute, at least in my mind.
yeah, yeah. Well, it's good. I mean, at least like it's nice to at least have something that helps you feel safe and know that you're
Right.
going, like, something's going to happen beyond just like everyone being like, oh, this isn't happening, we're just pretending
Hmm.
nothing's going on, don't want to rock the boat too much. I think I will do some research on that. I'll probably put on screen about like maybe a
Okay.
summary of like the laws or something, just avoid any misinformation there. But
Beautiful.
for people who don't know, maybe we should talk about like escorting in Japan and like soap lands and
Hmm.
things like that, and like how like modern sex work operates in Japan, because
Okay.
I think that's very, very different than it is in America.
Yeah, and it's very interesting. I love it. Thank you
Mm.
for bringing that up. I think the most interesting part is that penetrative sex, integral sex, is illegal, but for some reason it goes on in soapland. So soap, if someone wants to go out and do that, they cannot do it at like any store besides a soapland. If you order
Mm.
and if you call an escort to your house, it is illegal to have penetrative sex with that person of
Mm.
any kind. So like anal or vaginal.
Mm.
Um, so Soapland, you can do that. We have stores that are just specifically. How I don't know how graphic I can talk on your channel.
Oh,
I'm
go
trying to
as
think here.
graphic as you want.
Okay, thank you. So there's specific places for just like hand jobs, or specific places just for mouth blowjobs, not
Mm.
mouth jobs. Jesus,
Yeah.
blowjobs. Um, there's like it's very set in like what you can quote unquote order. So there's like places that are specifically for cross dressers,
Oh.
specifically
Mm.
for foreigners. Yeah, like you can pick your quote unquote poison.
Mm.
And I always found that to be really fun. You know, like we have like SM clubs here
Mm.
that you can again you can engage in like penetrative sex, but for the most part, people when they go there, they don't want to engage in that unless it's like pegging or.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
But sex workers, like you can call people. That's called diriheru delivery health. Oh, it's
Oh.
classified as health, like wellness, health and wellness. That's how they get around a lot of things.
I mean, I agree with that. I think that
Yeah,
would be great if like I think most people would argue that having regular good sex is part of their well-being.
very
So,
healthy.
yeah, that makes sense to me. But is it so the it's that specific acts are against the law, but not like escorting
Right.
or like sex work on the whole.
Sex work on the whole, like you have to have a or work for a company that
Mm.
has permission by the government to. So, for
Mhm.
example, I do like nude photo events, but I could not do a nude photo event without going through a company that has permission and working
Uh
under them.
mm.
So you can I mentioned this in the video that you were kind enough to do on my channel.
Mm.
You can't just like nudity is a big thing in Japan, and unless you have
Uh
permission to get naked, you
mhm.
cannot get naked.
That's very interesting. I wonder why the strictness around public nudity.
I well, what is it called? Why is it? What is that called in English? There's this. Why is it? It's public like. I think it's indecency, like not public
Uh
indecency, but there's like indecency laws. So
uh
in our porn, everything is censored.
yeah.
So even like an adult buying something from an adult company made for adults, it's still censored,
Mhm.
which always blows my mind.
Mhm.
Um, but
Like
I
we
always thought
can't
it,
have
yeah.
adults know what their own penis looks like. My God, they
And
might
it
get
messes with
ideas.
everyone here in Japan. It's the one thing that I think could really help society in Japan because I have so many fans, both female and male, who will say, "Oh, my parts they have to be weird, right?" And it's like because they can't see it,
Mm,
like they don't
yeah.
get to see the other people's parts, so they end up thinking theirs are weird, and then they go and watch uncensored Western porn, and a lot of people are circumcised, right? And Japanese
Yes.
people well, Japanese
Yeah.
people aren't. So they'll say, "Oh,
Yeah.
June, like it's disgusting, right?" And I'm like, "No, like mutilating a child's body parts is disgusting. Don't get
Mhm.
weird about it. Like your body's fine."
Mhm.
And in that respect, I really wish that they could show like on a non-sexual way, on a health, a human and societal health way. I wish that we could decensor, get rid of the censorship in porn.
Yeah, I totally agree with that because I mean, even as adults, like if you're watching porn and you're seeing, hey, none of these bodies look like mine. And this is still a problem even in
Mm,
the West where we
mm,
don't really have censorship around porn, like not communicating expectations about people's bodies and like what's normal. Like because when you're in school, the only thing you get is, anatomy of what
mm.
and what the ovaries look like, right? Or like a very practical here's an anatomical model. We're not going to talk about any other variations besides this. And if you
Yeah,
deviate from that at all, you're like, oh my gosh, like what's wrong with me? Am I diseased? Like, do I need to go to a doctor? And it's
yeah.
like, no, there's so much variety within individual people, and like just it's all good. Like as long as there's extremes where it can be uncomfortable, obviously. But
Right,
for the
right.
most part, like your body's probably fine and normal, and most people are not going to see a problem with it. Just to be totally clear, but
No.
yeah. Oh my gosh. So porn in Japan is also just in general interesting topic because it doesn't sound like you did porn or anything like that when you were in America
No.
at all. You don't necessarily have a point of reference for like working in the Western porn industry versus in Japan. But
Hmm.
it sounds like it's fairly similar with, STI checking and, you're going to be
Hmm.
working with. And I've previously talked with another YouTuber named Pup Amp who also works in the porn industry and his partner also works in the porn industry. And that all sounds very routine, though it sounds like it's more operated like brothels are maybe in terms of like the companies sort of being the main way that things are controlled, like you have to go through a
Yes.
company as opposed to working
Yeah.
independently. So like is OnlyFans or things like that's not a thing in Japan. There's no sort of equivalent to OnlyFans.
We have an equivalent to OnlyFans. It's called Fantia. But
Mm.
again, it's all censored, and people who use that site, I think it's what OnlyFans wish that they could have done,
Ah.
where like even people who don't do sex work use it as well, and it's
Uh.
just normal. So there's,
Mm.
if you say I have a Fantia, there's like really a 50% chance that it is erotic and 50% that it isn't. Whereas if someone says I have an OnlyFans, you assume it's erotic content.
Yeah. Despite what OnlyFans says about like no, people come on here to
Yeah.
they're professional tennis players and they share their workout pictures. No, they don't. No, they don't.
No.
But yeah, so gosh, I would say what is something that you assumed
Mhm.
getting into the industry
Oh,
would be true that maybe didn't turn out to be true? Did you have like any misconceptions or
yes.
misunderstandings before you got into it? Oh, okay.
So the biggest one, and looking back now, it's very funny, and it's the most common like misconception I see, and I get the comment all the time. It's actually annoying now, but
Ah.
when I first researched it, like going before I went into it, because I clearly looked up stuff and researched, but
Yeah.
I would always see like stuff from like 10, 20 years ago, like where
Oh.
the mafia was involved, Yakuza, they were
Mm.
involved with the JV industry. And that was when the JV industry made a lot of money. It was very lucrative. Whereas now there's so much paperwork and like so many fees are being paid to different companies that there's not as much money in it now as there was
Oh.
back then.
Mm.
So 100% the Yakuza is not involved. Honestly, the Yakuza is involved with stuff like idols or like all
Mm.
those cute boy bands. Like people don't
Mm.
want to, it's very uncomfortable to think about it, but like
Yeah.
the dirty industry like porn has less of a like Yakuza tie than the cute girls going like, wee, yay, so happy.
They go where the money goes. It's
They
not like
go
they
where
have
the
any.
money goes.
It's not that it's about it being like, oh, it's vile and bad. It's just that it's
Right.
if you can make $1 million off of somebody else's work, like why
Yeah.
wouldn't you do that? Yeah, that makes sense. What
Yeah.
is something that you really enjoy about working in the industry?
It's well, I mean, I mentioned it when I said like why I want to go in, but I
Mm.
really like. Oh, there's like, can I say two things?
Yeah, yeah. Go ahead.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you. So I like that I get to have a platform and I can talk as open as I want about like
Mm.
my sexuality and also tell people and explain like express, not explain, but express that like your sexual identity and your sexuality is a very personal thing, but it's not something you have to be ashamed of. Because
Mm.
I grew up in a very strict Southern Baptist house
Ah,
and
yeah.
I
I was raised
I
Catholic, so yeah, I get
oh
it.
my
Mm.
goodness. Well, we have a lot of trauma, religious baggage.
Yes, yeah. Luckily, no Catholic school for me. It was too expensive, but yeah,
Oh, wow.
yeah.
I went to Bible study and all of that.
Ah,
And
yeah.
um no, I just grew up like thinking that I was wrong and that God hated me. And
Mm,
not everyone has that experience, but people still think like, oh, like society hates me or I'm wrong, even if you don't attach the religious aspect to it. So with my platform, I can just talk to so many people on a worldwide scale and exchange those experiences and kind of I again, not on like in a narcissistic way, but it makes me feel so happy and fulfilled that even just one person is like, oh, June, seeing your YouTube channel or, you just existing makes me feel confident in my own skin. And I feel like more, again, confident to go out and try different things and be true to
mm,
myself. That
yeah.
is the greatest thing about doing this.
Mm-hmm.
And my second part of that answer is that I'm a queer person and being able to engage with a variety of partners and a variety of play with women or or with non-binary people or other queer people is so nice. And I am not the kind of person to go to, like, we have this thing called happening bars in Japan.
Okay.
um you could go and hook up with people, like, say for example, you and I would go
Mm,
together. We could do anything, like, if with a consenting partner, if there was like
mm.
Mr. A and you're like, oh, Mr. A, would you like to hook up? And you can hook up with each other there, or you can go to a love hotel, which are,
Ah.
like, I'm sure
Mm.
you know what they are. So
Yeah, yeah. Okay, yeah, though that's so interesting. So, gosh, there's so many questions. I have trouble like narrowing
you're
them down.
fine. You're totally fine.
Yeah, so I'm wondering like what is your experience being a queer woman in Japan? Because I like very little about that.
Oh, I think what comes up the most and what bothers me the most is when I get interviewed by like newspapers or TV shows or news channels or whatever. They'll
Mm.
say like, "Oh, when was the first time you ever had sex?" And I'll say, "Oh, when I was 12 with my girlfriend." And they're like, "We don't want to hear anything about the girl. Like, that's not real. Come on." Like,
Oh,
with
okay.
like with a guy, come on. And I'm like, what? That is so offensive. I didn't even like men until I was like 16. And that was after conversion therapy, so it's still up for debate. Like,
Yeah, Jesus. Oh, wow. Yeah. That'll conversion therapy does the number. But yeah,
yeah.
so there's sounds like there's like is that generally true of like queer relationships in general, or is that more
Mhm.
centered around like femme people and their relationships?
I Yeah, yeah, I would say that if a man was asked when was the first time you had sex, and he said, "Oh, when I was 12 with my boyfriend," it would still be counted as sex because it's penetrative, and
Oh,
that's
yeah. It's a penis
like
going somewhere. Yeah.
yeah, unfortunately, that's what's viewed as like the real, like me, just like
Mm.
me, because clearly when you're 12, you're not doing much, and it was a very sweet, pure, like, first experience. There
Mm,
wasn't
yeah.
like any like too crazy of actions going on, but to me it was still my first experience because it was more than just like making out, and lesbian sex is still sex.
Yeah, yeah. Oh,
So
yeah. No, that makes sense, and I'm kind of sad to hear that there's like maybe not as much. It sounds like it's very dismissive, not like hatred or
mhm.
anger in the way like
Yes,
conservative Americans, but it's just sort of like,
yes,
oh, I don't really get it. Like
yep.
that's not real. So,
So I always say, like, I prefer like the ambivalence in Japan rather than the violence in America that I
yeah,
experience. Like, I would rather people be like, they just don't want to talk about it, but they're not like, it is a flavor of homophobia, but it isn't a flavor that's gonna kill me, you know? Like, so
yeah. They're not like religiously motivated to be like,
no.
gay people shouldn't exist. Like,
Yeah.
definitely,
Pidgey. Sorry, my cat.
no
She won't stop
worries.
crying.
Cats always being like that. But let me see. So when you do make porn in Japan, that is like I'm not sure what the terminology would be exactly, but
You're
like
fine.
woman on woman pornography in Japan. Like, is that primarily for a female audience or for a male audience?
So it depends on the studio. So there's even
Mm.
we don't use these terms and they kind of gross me out, but just because we're having like an English conversation, like boy girl scenes. I hate that term so much, but I
That
learned it
just
recently.
dubious.
Yeah, don't like it, but it is very common apparently. So
Mm.
just for sake of being understood, and that's why we're having these conversations. So with boy girl stuff, there can even it sounds so gross. There can be studios that are for geared towards women, and then there are studios that are geared towards men.
Mm.
Uh, and the way they film and the way that the play is done, it's definitely like different. Like it's like some like I would imagine if a man were to watch porn that's geared towards women, even if it was like heterosexual sex,
Mm.
it would be a little bit too, I don't know how to describe it, maybe too fluffy for them. It's not
Mm.
too crazy. It's more like the romantic part. It's very slow, very
Mm.
passionate. Versus like sex that's sex not porn that's made for men typically tends to be a little bit more aggressive,
Mm.
what you imagine porn to be. And with lesbian films, I have never seen or had the pleasure of being in a lesbian studio or lesbian film that was filmed by a studio that was made for women.
Mm.
But Japanese porn in as a whole is filmed in a way that maybe Western porn isn't, and it has a lot of foreplay. It has a story. So even if it isn't geared towards women necessarily, I think women can still enjoy it.
Mm. Yeah, I think that makes sense because
Yeah.
I don't know if this is exactly why, but if you go to like the Pornhub statistics of like what people are
Mhm.
looking for, like by and large, the two things that women search for on Pornhub, well, the three are lesbian, Japanese, and hentai. Those are always in the top
Nice.
five or top three. So I don't know if it's necessarily looking for Japanese porn production companies that they're looking for,
Right.
if it's just the way that Japanese porn is done. It just happens to be more in the female ideal of it. But it sounds like
I think
consumption of porn
so.
by women is like more normalized in Japan as opposed to here where I think like you
Mhm.
have to be introduced to the idea that like women would even watch porn. Like it's very much seen as like a boys thing or a guys thing.
So I think in Japan, we have like the boys love comics, like
Mm.
yaoi,
Yeah.
where like so, and that's for mainly for women, right?
Mm-hmm.
So women enjoying like erotic content isn't too much of a far out idea here.
Mm-hmm.
But my female fans typically even say, like, they'll come to my events and they'll say, "Oh, I've never seen a single film of yours. Like, I'm not interested in those. Like, I like you, like, I like your face and your personality and what you stand for, but I'm not into porn." I
Mm.
mean, if you release like an erotic manga or like some sort of auditory thing, I'm down. But like some people just don't get off to porn. I personally don't like porn.
Mm-hmm.
I only watch it for like research at that point. I'm like, oh, okay, I'll use this lighting or this scene or,
Oh
you know.
yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. I think that's it's interesting because I think that's very true also in America as well, which is
Mhm,
most women I know like I know some women that watch like visual porn, but for the most part
mhm,
they love the erotica, they love like the
mhm.
drawn like stuff, like that's pretty much what they're into. But and they're really into it if they're into it sometimes. Like they can be
Yeah,
just into as much into porn as men, but the
if not
medium that
more.
they gravitate to is different.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, for sure. I like
Mm-hmm.
erotic fiction. Fan fiction has always been my go-to, and I like the
Mm-hmm.
comics. But real stuff, I that just worked to me. I'll just watch it and learn from it.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a
Which is,
good.
yeah.
Oh, go
Oh, go
ahead.
ahead. No, 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 go ahead, go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna ask. People have this misconception oftentimes that like people who do porn do it because they're like super horny all the time and they love porn, and
Oh
so that's
yeah.
why they make porn. And that's sort of the message that gets kind of sold in Western porn
Mm.
as well. As like, yeah, I'm doing this because I'm just basically such a nymphomaniac. I can't help myself. It's like, but in real life, they're just like, it's work. It's always a job. You have a 9 to 5, right? It's just somebody else's 9 to 5. And I guess I
Yeah.
just wanted to echo that sentiment, and maybe you could just reaffirm that it's correct to like not everyone who works in porn
Yeah.
is like a super horny person that watches porn 24/7 and that's why they do it for a career.
I'd say since it is my career, when I in my private life, I'm not interested in penetrative sex at all. I honestly like that's the furthest thing from my mind.
Mm.
Um, but I would say a lot of people that I interview or have the pleasure of becoming close to in my industry here in Japan, they're I I can't name names, obviously, but they are actually not into sex at all. I wouldn't go as far as saying like they're asexual or they're sex repulsed, but they're more
Mm.
interested in like the romantic side of a relationship rather than the
Ah.
sexual side.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but their persona that they do on camera is like this, like nasty hot bitch, like because it sells,
Yeah.
cute girl just wants to be hugged. It doesn't sell well, so
Yeah, yeah. I think it's I think almost like when you are treating it like a role and it is like an acting
Mm,
job
mm,
for
mm.
you, like you don't have to be into it or like it personally. And I know there's actually quite a number of people that are professional dominants here in the States that are asexual. And even though they
Right.
peg their clients or they do other sexual play with their clients or with their life partners, like it's either completely different for them mentally than
Hmm.
like regular sex would be, or like it's just comfortable for them to do it in a professional setting, but they
Hmm.
don't really like. And I know people that are asexual that are strippers, and people that are ace
Yeah,
that
yeah.
like do like everything across the board for sex work. And I think people just assume that if you're not super into sex, you can't do sex work. But it's a job like
No,
everything else, and
yeah.
everything is always like it would be like if you like worked as a chef every
Mhm.
day and then you came home and then also made yourself like a 4-star meal every day, like would that be the expectation we had for professional chefs? Probably not. We all know that professional chefs, after they're done in the kitchen, they drink out of like plastic tubs that they use for like food storage, and then they have like leftovers. Like that's what
Or
chefs
they're
do.
ordering out because no, I'm
Mm-hmm.
sure as hell not cooking if I'm a
Yeah.
professional chef.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of touching on what you mentioned earlier with like some people like their different flavors or their go-to for their
Mm-hmm.
erotic content. I don't know what you feel about this, but it always blows my mind when like porn is kind of like vilified. Like people are like, "Oh, I love hentai anime and like erotic manga, but I would never watch porn. Like that's dirty." but it's just different flavor. It's all erotic content. Like there's no like
Yeah.
it's not more pure or better than the other. They're
Oh
all
gosh.
erotic.
Yeah, exactly. Everywhere you go, doesn't matter what your hobby or interest is, there's always going to be somebody who's trying to make a hierarchy out of it and go,
Yeah,
this thing's
yeah.
better than this thing. Subs are better than dubs. You know, blah, blah, blah. Like, what fan fiction doesn't matter. And I luckily have not heard too many people that will say
Oh,
that, oh, hentai is better than porn with live actors. Like,
mm.
I can see it maybe from, like, if you're concerned about, like, exploitation of workers,
Yes.
because there was, like, this is less so a problem now, but there was like a really long running problem in the States of like predatory porn companies going after
Yeah.
18-year-olds on Craigslist and then like having them film like 3 or 4 scenes, paying them $800, and then just like tossing them on the side of the road when they were no longer the hot new thing and weren't making enough money. And that is very much worth critiquing, but that is not
Mm.
representative of the entire porn industry. And like you can't just go all hentai is better than all kinds of porn
Yeah.
because of this one very like niche example. So yeah, exactly like what you said. I don't think that there's any sort of real hierarchy between like consuming something. And I think if you have
Mm.
the mental blockage around like watching visual porn because you think it's bad, but like your sexy ASMR is fine, like I think you just need to understand that it's all like if you show that to like a conservative preacher, it's all like demonic and
Yeah.
it's all porn
Yeah.
and evil. So like you might as
You're
well just
not
like
getting
let it
into the
go.
pearly gates with your
Exactly.
daddy
Yeah.
dom like
Mm-hmm.
ASMR 30 minute.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, exactly that. Mm. Is ASMR like a sexy ASMR thing in
Yeah.
Japan?
It's very popular. It's very,
Oh,
very
interesting.
popular.
I always
Yeah.
figured it was a very like English speaking phenomena, but I can yeah,
Mm.
no that they probably do it way better as well. Like
Like I can't, I've been trying to get the ear mic forever, for like half a year, and it is just
oh.
sold out and it never goes into stock, or never goes back into stock.
Mm.
But it's called situation role play, for
Mm.
like those ASMR. It is not called ASMR role play, but it's called situation role play. And I didn't know
Mm.
why. Like we call it ASMR, but it's ASMR situation role play. And the
Hmm.
first time I saw that word, I was like, that's so weird. That's so long. Like just take
Yeah,
out
it's a long word.
situation.
Yeah.
Situation, there's situations in role play. You don't need it.
Yeah,
It's kind of
exactly. It's sort
redundant.
of built into the word, I guess. I don't know. But
Hmm.
so you also mentioned that people who do like more heterosexual porn, it tends to be
Hmm.
more stereotypically aggressive. Do you find
Yeah.
that? I don't necessarily know if you'd have a point of reference to Western porn. Like, is rough sex like the standard or like common in heterosexual pornography, or is there like shades of it?
Hmm. There's definitely shades. With me having lots of friends in the Western porn industry and seeing
Mm,
their work, I would never want to do that. It's not, again, not
mm,
yucking someone's yum,
mm.
but like five guys all going in like all the holes that they possibly could on one person, and then just being as like violent and aggressive as possible to like get a lot of action in those scenes. I see that in Western porn a lot, and that is just
Yeah.
so unappealing to me. But in Japanese porn, foreplay and deep, we call it deep kissing, but I guess like French kissing
Mm.
is so big and important, and it's because we have the censorship, so they have to kind of make other parts of the body erotic.
Ah, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So like slow shots of going up someone's leg, and even showing like, again, like places that maybe Western audiences aren't too into, like armpits or the back
Mm.
of someone's leg, or their navel or the back of their neck, like their nape. Those areas are like eroticized because we can't show what Western porn just like shows way too much of, in my
Yeah,
opinion. Not that
it's like
it's shameful, but
yeah.
I don't want to see a guy's taint for like 5 minutes. There's nothing sexual about that. That's so boring. Like there's no creativity there. But
Yeah.
with Japanese porn, there's like typically a story. Honestly,
Mm.
my Western viewers will be like, June, I love your films, but like, god damn, like I'm skipping 20 minutes of your hour-long film because it's just like filler. But that is the yummy
Filler,
part
yeah.
of it, the delicious part of Japanese porn for Japanese people.
Yeah, I think that's it's people are very adaptable. I feel like when it comes to their porn habits, like it's not just that like some people will say, "Oh, well the porn industry has to be that way because that's what people want to see." And it's like, well,
Mhm.
obviously if you put regulations into things and people who are, they're first starting to watch porn when they're like in high school or something and they're
Mhm.
developing their consumption habits, like what's normal then allowed then is going to influence like what they want when they're 18, 20, 25. And like if your
Right.
porn focuses on the foreplay and
Hmm.
on the romance and the story of it first, then like that's what you're going to adapt to. And if your porn is 2 seconds in, it's double penetration in somebody's asshole, like that's gonna be like
It,
what your standard is. So, it's
yeah.
not just that it's like, oh, it's the customer's fault that it's like this. Like people
No,
will
they're being,
adapt.
yeah. And stories are awesome. Well, I mean,
Yeah.
again, like it's our preference. I imagine you
Mm-hmm.
and I both prefer like especially with BDSM, there's like fun with that role play and the setting.
Mm-hmm.
Um, just jumping right into penetration is just it's such a waste. I honestly feel that way. Like it's just, why would you go into like just jumping right into that? That's not the end all be all of
Mm.
sex.
Yeah, that's something. My only kind of real exposure to any kind of pornography in Japan has
Hmm.
been like through like Japanese rope masters, because like
Hmm.
the
Hmm.
way that like most Western people originally like learned about like shibari techniques was by watching. I can't think of any names right now on top of my head,
You're
unfortunately. But
fine.
like all the famous people that have influenced all the rope masters since then,
Yeah.
like they mostly did pink films. They mostly did
Yep.
pornography, and so it's very influenced by that, but it tends to be this like slow build up, and like, oh, we're like, here yukata is getting slowly raised off of his thigh, and then like, the navel shots and the nape and everything that you were describing. So
Mhm.
I think that's very interesting that there's like just such a difference in taste. But actually, let's talk about BDSM in Japanese
Yeah.
porn, because I did kind of ask about rough sex, but then also BDSM is sort of separate from that. Is that
Mhm.
common in BDSM porn, or is it
Yes.
specialized? Okay, because
And I am so excited to tell you this one
yes.
little thing. And you might already know, but if I
Mm,
hope you don't, I want to hear your reaction.
okay.
So, when I first started dating in Japan, and I had already had BDSM experiences in America, I already knew that I
Mm.
liked it. I went on a date with a guy, and one of the first questions he asks is, so are you an S or an M? And I was like, whoa, like BDSM already? Like Japan rules. Like I've come to the right country. But it's
Mm.
not, they use it in a casual way. So are you more like not aggressive and like, are you more like forthcoming or are you more like reserved? That's the way they use it.
Ah,
Um,
interesting.
so it is not BDSM SM. If you're talking about BDSM and then you use the term S or M, then yeah, it's going to be like the submissive and more like the master stuff. But
Mm.
in everyday conversation, yeah, you could just be talking to your friends and it's like, oh, are you an S or an M? It's like, oh, I'm more of an M. Like I'm more like, I like things that happen. Like I'd like it to be the one on the receiving end rather than the one that's doing. Yeah, that's a good
Mm.
way. It's receiving and giving. That's the
Ah,
way
I
it's
see. So it's sort of like top and bottom almost.
almost, but like even if a guy says like he's an M, he wants to be uh, like he wants to be ridden. Like the image that I get is like he wants to be ridden cowgirl style by like a really like kind of dominant and aggressive lady, but no
Mm.
like whips or anything. And there's even like phrases for it. There's like maguro emmu, which is like a tuna fish laying down on the bed. So like if a guy is like, oh,
Mm.
I'm M, and then he sucks in bed, we'll call him like maguro emmu,
Mm. He's like a
and
dead
he's
fish.
like a dead fish. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Mm.
So that's the way, I just thought it was so funny every time
That's
I
so
talk to someone.
Yeah, definitely. People we talked on your show about people that are not very good about asking for what they want, and
Uh-huh.
people that are very nervous about like, oh, I want to do this thing, or this is what I prefer, or whatever. And like, the fact that you can just come out in a conversation, I think this has to go with the fact that like sex is probably less stigmatized there than it is here. You can just say like, this is what I want. But to be clear, because like the S and M, even within the BDSM acronym, can mean like two
Mhm.
different things. So does
Okay.
does M mean more like masochist, or is it like referring to like a shortened word, or like an abbreviation for something, or like S
It's
is
it's shortened for masochist, so it's
uh
mazo. They say
oh, okay.
mazo for it's like
Mm-hmm.
the shortened word for masochist, and when you say it in Japanese. And then S is sado, which is like the shortened of sadist.
Okay, yeah, those so that
But
makes
when
sense.
people use it in casual conversation, it's not regarding sex. It's more how you exist within even a vanilla relationship can have S and M. And it's
Mm.
just kind of just how do you describe your personality. So if you're more like reserved and you prefer like your partner to like be the one that initiates play, you're going to be an M. Or if you prefer to be the one that kind of like leads the tempo, even within
Mm.
vanilla sex, you're going to be an
Mm-hmm.
S. So it kind of blew my mind because I had dated like really sadistic men and women in or like masochistic people in America, and no one would ever in like vanilla sex, no one was like, oh yeah, I'm M. Like you would only use those words within the
Mm-hmm.
BDSM what is it?
Like
Perspective?
Yeah, yeah,
or realm.
exactly. Exactly. Like it's very segmented. Like I think people here see like vanilla sex and BDSM sex as two very different things. Like there's some overlap,
Yeah.
right? But you know, use a blindfold, use handcuffs or whatever. But
Yeah.
especially like heterosexual people do not have conversations about like
No.
I want to be a top, I want to be a bottom, I want to do this, that, and the other. Because
No.
the default assumption is just that the only thing you're going to do is like if you're the
Uh,
woman, you're going to be more of a bottom, you're going to be more submissive, and the man's supposed to be more masculine and dominant. And
right.
so every man that wants to be pegged is languishing, just silently hoping that somebody will volunteer to peg them. And every dominant woman is
Sucks.
just like frustrated constantly because no man will take her seriously. So,
So glad that's not me. I feel like I want to keep, I like people like you on YouTube. I'm so grateful because people can hear your content and then see like, oh, it's okay. Like I'm not a weirdo or a freak or anything.
mm,
And hopefully engage in that kind of play if they have those fantasies or they want to. But God, if I was just doing vanilla sex all the time, I would not be enjoying my life very much.
yeah, and that's the thing, right? Is like people who really like BDSM, like it's not just like a optional spice where you're like, oh, I
Right.
can just choose to, you know, have it or leave it or whatever. It's
Right.
something that's you can go with it for a time, or you can go without it for a time, but you're not
Hmm.
necessarily going to be able to go forever without it,
Hmm.
and you can't necessarily survive in a relationship where it's not there. But so
Right.
one kind of question I have is in Japan it sounds like it's more normalized for like men to be bottoms or and
Yes.
also be tops. So it's like is there's no stigma attached to that at all, or is it just like different types of masculinity, or like how does that work?
I would say that because sex is such a stigma and like has such a stigma and is such a taboo topic that your private life it's not going to be talked about, but like if you
Mm.
so on a like on a society level no one should know that you are submissive, but it I feel like how do I phrase this, because I would say yes, like my answer to your question is yes, there are more submissive men in Japan than what I experienced in the West and what I see as an adult now even on the World Wide Web, and that it wouldn't be such an embarrassing or horrible thing to be a submissive male
Mm.
in Japanese society. But again, it's not really something like you would share to your buddies that you're an M, but that M is not the same as what it means in Western, like in a
Mm.
Western society. So that M could just mean that you like a woman, taking charge and, leading, taking charge of the tempo and leading the sexual
Mm.
experience. But it's yeah, like it's open, but it's not. Like I also mentioned this on a different interview I was in, but they said like what surprised you about why are you biting me? Surprised me about moving to
Okay.
Japan is that when I
Mm.
would try to hold hands with my partners, they would say like, oh no, 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 no. Like people are watching, like we're on the train, you can't do that. But when you go and walk outside, there's like a huge sign, lit up neon sign that's like so bland, or like there's these girls on the street like passing out
Yeah.
flyers like come get a sucky sucky, like there's just all like it's right in front of us but I can't hold my partner's hand because people are looking.
Mm.
Like it's open but it's not, which I think goes into what I'm
Mm.
trying to say about the submissive men is like
Mm.
it wouldn't be such a bad thing but it's not something that you're going to say out loud
Mm.
unless it's like in that casual like, oh yeah, I'm more of an M, or like I prefer more like dominant women.
Mm.
But that the word dominant and submissive, there's definitely like nuance, and I get that there is that in Western context as well. But I feel like BDSM, like it's the fact that we're using that word in a casual sense in Japan, like S&M, shows how it's not that much of a big deal.
Mm.
But I don't know if I'm vocalizing myself correctly, but I did my best.
Yes, I think I understand what you're saying. I think it sounds like what you're saying is there's more like it's open in closed spaces. Like it's not open and
Yeah,
open.
but you
It's
wouldn't be seen as like less of a man for being
yeah,
submissive,
which is like
because
oh
we
my
have a lot of
gosh.
cross dressing is a very big thing here too,
Ah.
especially because a lot of Japanese men typically have like a slender build and very beautiful faces and long
Mm.
like just what is it, like DNA wise, like as a group, as an ethnic group, like they
Mm.
tend to have more like effeminate features.
Yeah.
And cross-dressing is very big in Japan too, especially at those S&M clubs. Like I love that's why I love going. Like a man will arrive in his like suit and tie from work. He'd be like, I'm going to go change. And he comes out in like the most beautiful like lingerie set. He's like,
Mm.
hi, like I'm Sarah or something. And I'm like, that is awesome.
That's
I love
awesome.
that.
Yes.
Hi,
Oh,
Sarah. Like,
Yes. Okay. So one of the other interviews I did recently, I was talking to someone named Carly DeVille, who's a
yes,
sexologist. I don't know if
I
you
watched
if you
that
saw
one.
that one, but
Yep.
yeah, we talked a lot about sissification and pegging and things like that. And like here, oh my gosh, like even admitting that you want to try on a pair of women's underwear is like people bury that shit for like 50 years and they
Oh.
just never bring it up because they don't want to lose their relationship or lose their marriage or have it be brought
Mm.
up in divorce court or like whatever horror
Oh,
scenarios they're thinking in their head because it's seen as so deviant and so perverted
shameful.
that you would even think of that, even though it's like everyone thinks high heels are hot. Like I'm
Yeah.
pretty sure I'm asexual and I think high heels are hot. So like, you know, I think it's so it's like it. I wish that we could be more like that in terms of
Yeah.
openness with like you can be a man socially and then also like dress up and have a persona named Sarah that you when you go to the
Yeah.
SM club you dress up in your sparkly sequin dress that you
Yeah.
you know
Like,
got custom
hello,
made.
Sarah.
Yes, I that's really nice. I'm happy to hear that because it gives me hope that there's an alternative to just like oppression and like masculinity can only be this one
Yeah.
very narrow thing. And yeah, just thank you so much. That's a really good little tidbit. So I know we don't have a ton of time left, but
Okay.
I did want to ask like one or two more questions.
You're
So
totally fine.
okay, great. So one
My
question this
cat's
might
hair is
be
just falling all over my face, so I'll be touching it because
it's all
she's
good. I
shedding.
maybe if I can convince my dog to wake up, she'll be on
Oh,
my
I
lap,
love
and then we can.
Bandit.
Yeah, she. I have headphones on, but she's currently like. For everyone in my audience always wants the Bandit update. They're like, where is she? Is she okay?
How
How's your
is
dog?
Bandit?
Yes, then we
Evie, we
have
don't want
this.
to hear about sex. We want to
Yeah,
hear about
like
Bandit.
cat brushing, awesome. Just if I had a video of just that, they'd be like, this is the best content we've ever seen on your channel.
While we're talking about BDSM.
Yeah. But actually, speaking of BDSM, let's talk about that for a second because there are definitely certain types of BDSM that I think are sort of associated in the West with
Okay.
Japan, and I'm kind of I'm trying to think of the one of it was like Omarashi, I think it's like the
Okay.
one where
Omurashi.
it's
Yeah, P
yeah,
play.
because here in the West like there's water sports, but that's separate
Oh,
from
yeah,
like
because there's not the shame. That's
yeah, because
right.
the shame. That's one of the things. Also with shibari as well with bondage, there's not the shame element is not there, and that's actually one of
Oh,
the
it's. Oh.
yeah, one of the big differences that every and I've gone to a couple classes like there'll be Japanese rope masters that come to America
Mm-hmm.
and they'll have translators with them or something, and
Mm-hmm.
they're always like they try to communicate this idea that like in Japan like it's a lot about humiliation and shame and like
Mm-hmm.
revealing this hidden thing, and in
Mm-hmm.
America like especially when you're in kink spaces, nudity is more common. It's not necessarily sexualized,
Oh,
which is
yeah.
weird because nudity everywhere else in America is like, oh my god, a woman's nipple, like
Yeah.
freaking out. But for some reason, in kink context, like there's not this like shame and humiliation tends to be more
Mm-hmm.
reserved for like a female dominant, like humiliating a man for like having a small penis or like
Mm-hmm.
somebody
Mm-hmm.
being like verbally berated. And those are all like valid
Mm-hmm.
ways of doing it, but there's not this like oh my gosh, this like hidden thing's going to be revealed or this is going to happen and I'm going to be shamed or like the public's going to notice or something's going to
Mm-hmm.
happen. And I was just, it sounds like that something maybe is news for you about the shibari and humiliation side of it. So,
I didn't know that it didn't have that context with bondage
mm,
in the Western side. Like I always thought like there was the shame or like the being controlled and but yeah, I guess it's more about control rather than shame. But then in Japan it
yeah.
is more about like the shame rather than being controlled. Because in Japanese society, I feel like we're always controlled and the average Japanese person is controlled by so many things in their life. I mean, any human is, but especially in
Mm,
Japanese work society. But it is more about a shame. It's like I shouldn't be doing this. This is shameful. And this person is taking control of me, but because of that, I am in a shameful position, and I'm at their
mm.
mercy.
Yeah. It's definitely in America, it's definitely about power and control, but I think bondage as well can be people get very focused on just like the physical experience of it and like being able
Mm-hmm.
to endure something that's really painful or being able to
Mm-hmm.
suffer for their partner or there's a lot of culture in America around it being like beautiful for like photography purposes and people like
Mm-hmm.
liking the prestige of like being photographed and being seen by others doing this like impressive thing. So the shame element, it's almost like the opposite sometimes, where it's like I'm proud of having done this and I want other people to know about it. Some people do play with the humiliation element, especially I find a lot of male tops, if they started
Right.
out by watching like Japanese, like maybe subtitled porn or something,
Hmm.
they will bring that more into their rope. But if you're like a Western top or a Western, bondage person, that shame and humiliation element isn't so much there, because especially because there is a sort of Western bondage has its own history of like I don't know if you know anything about that at all, but there's like sort of like Western bondage comics before anyone kind of brought anything over from Japan, and those were very aesthetic. They were very much about like accentuating like women that were in like really really super tall high heels and corsets, and like it was about like accentuating the female form while also controlling it at the same time, if that makes sense, but not in a way that
Yeah.
was humiliating it so much as like reveling in it, I guess, and being like, ah, you're mine, I've captured you, sort of mentality.
This is so cool. I thought like, oh yeah, I understand BDSM and like a Western. I just thought like shame was a part of it, like in a
Mm,
controlled shame, not shame like I
yeah.
shouldn't be, engaging
Mm,
this kind of play, but like, oh no, the person who's tying me up, the rope master, is like in control of the situation, and I'm in such a shameful position. But yeah, no, as you were saying that, I was thinking about like even the Instagram accounts that I follow, like there's like these rope masters who live in like Seattle and California.
mm,
All of the pictures that they upload are very like confident, beautiful women. But then if I compare it to, and it's not to say that the Japanese counterparts aren't, but the poses that we do in Japanese shibari are always like our head low, like you have to like lower your head and kind of like turn up like this and have it's
mm-hmm.
like the expression is very important. There's a lot of acting involved with it. But yeah, if I compare, and again, you and I, Evie and I aren't saying like a blanket statement for everyone,
Mm-hmm.
but
Mm-hmm.
comparing it now in my head, I'm like, yeah, yeah, I would agree with that, but I had never ever thought about it.
Yeah, it's one of those like subtle nuances in that like there's kinky people all over the world, but the way that we do
Mhm.
kink sometimes is a little bit different because our societies influence the way that we do kink and the way that we
Yeah.
process those desires. So yeah, thank you. I am happy to introduce that concept to you, but one of the questions that I had related to that is like what like it sounds like shame is a really big element of it, like in general,
Mhm.
but maybe not necessarily like it's infused in everything else, but maybe not so much just like explicitly humiliation play. Although,
Mhm.
side tangent, have you watched the movie R100? Do you know what that is?
No, I'm really bad with movies.
Okay, it sure has a different. It's actually a Japanese movie,
Okay.
um, but it's literally the letter R and then 100,
Okay, I'm
and
looking up.
you should watch it because it's about a guy basically hiring a company of professional dominatrixes to randomly show up and do various
What?
BDSM things to him. It's a really fun movie, and it actually has visual examples of what subspace feels like, which is interesting. But in that movie, they go through a lot of different stuff, but like just outright humiliation isn't one of them, which I found really interesting because
Okay.
or maybe the very very first dom is more humiliation focused, but it's not like in America, especially with male submissives, it's very focused sometimes on like you have a small penis and you're worthless and blah blah blah, and
Mhm.
I can't do it because I'm not a
You're
humiliation
fine.
top, but like that kind of idea of that sort of thing. But I'm
I
curious, like,
Oh,
oh,
go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead. No, no, go
I
ahead. Please finish your question.
okay, I was just gonna ask like what kinds of BDSM are like
Mhm.
most common that you've observed, and what does that look like?
But I want to answer that, but just touching on
Mm,
you talking about like how humiliation play it goes on in like a Western environment. When I engage with submissive men, and we call them like men here, and
mm,
again, like the meaning is a little bit different than what you cover on your channel, and when you're
mm,
talking in a Western Western
mm,
field.
mm.
Um, for a lot of men in Japan that I engage in that kind of play with, just being like they're like having me sit on their face, and I'm not ever like I'm just like, oh, you're such a naughty guy, like are you sure you should be doing this, like uh, wow, like does your boss know that you do this, like it's almost like a playful
Ah,
domination
mm-hmm.
that is really popular here. And I would say, yeah, like less so than the rough play, like guys just want to be kind of like teased and
Ah,
made feel like we have this word komatteru, like that you are in trouble, but like you're in a tough spot, like
okay.
but you're not in danger. Like it's not the danger part of like being whipped and like, oh, am my body physically going to be able to handle this? It's more
Mm,
like Oh wow, you're this excited already? Like, my goodness, you couldn't wait. Like that kind of
Mm.
domination is what I see a lot in Japanese porn and in like in my own private life and just hearing stories from fans. As far as popular BDSM play in Japan, number one, it's got to be rope. I wish pegging was a little bit more popular, but that takes training.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Um, I I don't really see pet play as much. I do like pet play. I don't see that as much. Could we like go down like a list or like do you have some in because just thinking off the top of my head, it's a little bit harder, but since you're like the BDSM
Like
master,
power exchange, I guess. Like, do people have like dominant submissive relationships at all? Because it sounds like it's mostly, I don't know, more temporary than that, I
separate.
guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, more
It's
separated.
it's definitely temporary. I have a friend who lives in a 100 like one sorry 24/7 slave master relationship and she's like branded and everything and she goes
Mm,
around and does shows with her master. But that is the only person I've ever heard of or seen. And I work in sex work and BDSM,
mm.
and also go to like many SM clubs and have many friends in that. I would say it's a very like on off kind of thing.
Ah.
Once you engage in the play, you go back to being a salary man, and it's not an everyday thing for you, and maybe not even an every week thing. It doesn't consume you as much as.
Mm.
But do you think in the West it's different? Like people who like power play, is it more, or is it just that it's more common? I don't know.
I think the desire for it is more common because I think like it could just be my audience and the people I've
Hmm.
cultivated, but I find a lot of people, even if they don't do it, they have an ideal to work towards it. Like if they could have the relationship of their dreams in BDSM, they'd want to have some kind of either more ongoing, going very regular BDSM
Hmm.
activities like every weekend, every time they have sex,
Hmm.
or they'd want to have like a 24/7 relationship or something where they're dominant
Hmm.
submissive on a regular basis, not just the play. If someone
Hmm.
is looking for mostly just play, I find that tends to be more common with male submissives who are kind of, they do the thing, they get off, they go back to, working
Hmm.
during the week, and then they don't have the urge or the desire to do something again until like maybe a week or two later. And I find that more female submissives, I think maybe
Hmm.
because of like the romance element of it and wanting to have that feeling in the relationship of like caretaking and someone like being an authority over you, but like in a not
Hmm.
in a authoritarian way, but in a I can trust this person.
Yeah.
They would do anything for me. I would do anything for them, kind of a thing, and that's
Right.
sort of reflected in their BDSM.
Like talking with you today, it's making me feel like there's a lot of overlap because like BDSM,
Mm.
there's like set play that you can do, but I feel like the desire or like the nuance behind why or how you want to engage is in that is different between Japanese and Western society.
Mm-hmm.
But for the most part, the play is the same. Like when I go to SM, but rope play is just very, very big. That is number one. Like if I go to an SM club, there's like these giant
Mm-hmm.
hooks on the ceiling, on the walls. You'll get tied to a cage that's in the corner while everyone's just like sipping tea.
Mm.
Um, Being tied up is a very big thing.
Do people do like corporal punishment stuff at all? Like, do they like caning, spanking, paddles, like things like that?
Well, like we have it. I've never seen caning,
Mm.
ever, but I'm sure it exists. It's just
Mm.
owie. Like, wow, Evie, I heard
Yeah.
like your story was. I was like, geez, I'm more of an S, so, and I
Mm.
don't like to be dom too much.
Mm-hmm.
Um, like spanking is again like in Western, we do it with in vanilla relationships too. I I feel like I'm almost like at a loss. Like your question is so good, and I felt like I know a lot about these spaces, but I feel like it's almost just the same as in Western. Like we have all that,
But it's
and
just what's popular is different.
I think what's popular is different. And if someone engages in bondage, it's less about leather and more about again like the hemp rope. It's more like a traditional look. Like
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
that's one thing that I have noticed by being here is like the a BDSM dom, what they might wear in America is totally different than what they would wear in Japan.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Which
and
makes
it's definitely more,
sense.
yeah,
Because there's like a
because the
very
appeal is different,
Yeah, well, not only the appeal is different, but the history is really different. Because, like, in
right?
America, the reason why people, like, wear leather is because of, like, this one very iconic image of, like, this guy in, like, full leather gear with, like, a sexy motorcycle that influenced the gay community's development of BDSM, which then influenced the straight community's development of BDSM. And everybody was
So,
just super horny about leather and motorcycles and stuff because they were mostly ex military guys that, because they were gay after World War II,
mm,
were in isolated communities where they were basically like kind of able to explore their sexuality, but also wanted to project like strength
Masculinity.
and like
Yeah.
outlaw and like being an outlaw and masculinity as a way to sort of like be protective against like
Right.
gay hate crimes basically. And so that's like sort of why the West, and also this is true I think in Germany and some places in Europe as well, is kind of similar, but in America it's very specifically like leather and jeans and stuff are sort of like quintessentially
Right.
American, but they also have this very clear history behind them for like why people found them sexy.
Right. Are like fuck, I'm gonna mess up the word.
Mm.
It's called concho in Japanese, but enemas, are those a
Oh,
big thing?
enemas.
So
Yes.
that's huge.
Mm.
That's something that I didn't really see a lot in Western play, at least when I was in the community in
Mm.
America and then moved to Japan. And it is big time here. And like submissives or people who identify as like typically really like it, and they say like, "Oh, I like the feeling of being full," but I'm like, "Oh no, that hurts my tummy." I do it like for work, but
Mm.
whew.
Yeah, enemas are a thing. Actually, funnily enough, I think the first time I remember seeing somebody talk about like enema play was probably on Tumblr. So like
Okay,
it's
okay.
it's very much a thing, but I think again the contexts are similar but different because in America with like water sports in general, it tends to be done in like higher level power exchange relationships where it's like it's so you're so submissive towards somebody and you're basically like an object and you're like so worthless that they would just piss on you, and it's sort of like almost done in this sort of like dismissive controlling way. And
Hmm.
it can also be done sort of
Yeah,
maybe because you know, I think the closest thing that would be like to omoroshi would be like somebody who's like a pet player and they're like pet playing like being like litter box trained or like toilet trained
right,
or something like that, but that's not very common, in comparison to I think the way that it's done over there. It's different kind of context, and enema plays are done, but it's something you don't hear a lot about because obviously you'd have to do it like in private. You'd have to
in
do
a
it in your own home. But I think it has that same sort of thing of like the feeling of fullness and control, and like somebody, especially if somebody's doing it to you and they're like pumping the water into your butt to give you an enema. It's like wow, they're controlling you in this really like
right.
super invasive medical way. I think actually it tends to be done more from a medical play context of people who like
Really?
fetishize like nurses and like medical
Yeah.
procedures and stuff. It's like, oh no, this evil bad nurse is giving me an enema for medical reasons, and that is something that's very much a thing. A thing here that I'm not into personally. I find medical stuff
Yeah.
to just keep it away from me. But yeah.
Don't like anything to do with toilet stuff.
Mm.
Well, on any side, if I'm on like the more dominant or more submissive side.
Mm-hmm.
But also talking with you, I know we've talked a while, and I don't want to
Mm.
take too much of your time, but I would say something in that ties into BDSM and how we're able to enjoy it here in Japan is that we have like places like love hotels and BDSM themed love hotels and
Mm.
as well as SM clubs. And I feel like it's more readily and like safer for us to engage in that kind of play here in Japan. Whereas like I'm
Yeah.
thinking my experiences in America, like you would have to go out and buy a lot of stuff and then do it in your bedroom. And that like it was kind of hard for me to like it's easier to kind of get into the mood and the character when you're in a dungeon room like that you just rented out for like, $100 for 4 hours or something.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know if it's something you can relate to. I would love if you could come to Japan and see all the fun SM hotels that we have.
Yes, I would. It's totally on my bucket list. I would love to go to Japan and like be in Tokyo or wherever it is that I'm assuming it's probably mostly in Tokyo, but they probably have it in other larger cities
Yeah,
and get to do
yeah.
that and then go off and see the ocean and go to a hot spring and like do all that, because when
Yeah.
I'm on vacation I love doing a mix of like being in nature but then like after a weekend of doing a lot of really fucked up BDSM stuff. That's like the perfect dichotomy to me. But yeah, I think in America part of the reason we have BDSM dungeons is because like you said, with the expense of having to buy a bunch of equipment and then do it at
Mhm.
home, but then you're at your home, so it's hard to get into a character. But it's also kind of unsafe because then, like, a stranger that maybe you might have met that night or on the
Mhm.
internet or something, like, now know your house and the layout of your
Yeah.
house and everything else, so like, that's
Yep.
kind of dangerous.
Yep.
But we do. There was a while there where there was a company that was trying to start. They called it Kink B&B, and they were trying to
Okay.
do more like rentable, individual, like kink spaces. And
Okay.
people can go to Airbnbs and do some
Yeah.
BDSM stuff. I did actually talk to somebody. It's not up on my channel yet, but I did an interview with
Mhm.
somebody who's really into spanking, and they actually host spanking parties at Airbnbs where them and a bunch of people literally just spank each other in Airbnbs. And apparently, no one ever knows what's going on. And I'm like, they think it's
Because
secure.
sometimes they have like security cameras, right? So you have to be
That's
careful.
what I asked about. They're like, oh, I haven't really had a problem with that yet, and I'm like, I don't know,
All right.
landlords and Airbnb people, they can be a little invasive, but yeah,
Hmm.
there's love hotels. I think stuff like that would be so beneficial for people to have more. Because
Yeah.
I sort of had an experience like that. I was in the UK and I found like an hourly rentable dungeon in London. It was like it ended up being somewhere, in the middle of nowhere downtown. It was in
Okay.
like a housing block somewhere, and then somebody had basically converted their entire house into a rentable dungeon. And it was
Wow.
really awesome because they could have separate rooms where,
Hmm.
here's kind of like the boudoir, here's kind of more of the traditional dungeon, here's a closet we've converted into a cage. It was really awesome.
A
And I,
closet cage. I love
Yes.
it.
Oh yeah. Just it's so easy. Just like take your door off your
Yeah.
closet, change it out to metal bars, and there you
Yeah.
go. It's so easy. Um,
Easy. I love it.
but
Oh my God.
yes, it's so great. So I like having that experience. I'm like, wow, I wish more people could do that because, like people have roommates, and especially these days with housing prices the way they are, like we all have roommates. I have roommates, so you can't always get up to the stuff you wish you could do in your own home as opposed to getting out to do it. So I wish we'd have more, but
I
I think that
do.
may be more
It's
of a
one of,
legal problem than anything because I
I
think
think so.
yeah, the association here, especially if it's like hourly, like rentable places or
Hmm.
like motels, like the association is always with like prostitution. And because that's so stigmatized here and so illegal, it's
Mm.
just like even if you were doing it with a consensual partner that wasn't paying you, you're still constantly like, am I getting, are the police watching me? Like,
Yeah, it sucks that too. Like adults can't just go and enjoy themselves, even if you take the money out of it. Because obviously, if you put money in it, we two of us probably don't care. But
mm,
like in Japan, you can go on a date or you can meet someone at a bar, and if you guys click, and you want to go do something more, there's a safe place for you to do it where
mm.
there's cameras of you guys going in, and then actually the first time I ever went to one, I went with my boyfriend, and I didn't know that you cannot walk out without that person. So I went to just go get breakfast for
Oh,
us. And the lady at the front was like, "Stop, stop, stop! Like, where's the guy? Like, because they don't know if like I murdered him or like if he's just like,
yeah.
there's a big safety thing, and I really
Mm-hmm.
appreciate that. It makes me feel really safe when I go to those places, especially if it's not someone that I've known for a long time.
Yeah, I think that sounds really great. Again, I hope we have that at some point, or like somebody
Yeah,
makes that happen, or even if people go travel, they go and experience it. Because I think people assume it's like dirty or seedy or whatever. But all the videos I've seen of people
they're
visiting
so
places like
clean.
that,
It's
they're so
Japan. It's
clean.
clean.
Yeah,
It's
so clean.
super clean.
Hmm.
Our toilets in our like what is it like train stations are cleaner than most like American home toilets. Okay,
Yes.
I will take that shot.
Yes, yes. No, I from everything I've seen from travel vlogs, I think I agree with that. Well,
Yeah,
thank you so much for being with us
my
today.
pleasure.
Yes,
Thank you. This was so
mhm.
fun.
Yes, I've had so much fun. This has been such a blast. Before we wrap up, are there any thoughts or like anything that you want to shout out or promote before we end today's video?
Thank you so much for having me. Everyone, if you're watching this video, please subscribe to Evie's channel. Her content is amazing. I have a channel as well. And then I also do like OnlyFans, Twitter, Instagram. You can find all of it by just searching my name or just, yeah, I don't know. Maybe Evie will put it in the description
Yeah.
if I give her like a link
Mm-hmm.
tree. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
there you go. So just click the link tree and you can find all my stuff. And yeah, please leave a nice comment, share this video if you enjoyed it, and keep supporting Evie. This was so
Oh,
fun. Thank
thank
you so
you.
much.
Yes, everyone, please go check out June's content. It is mostly catered towards a Japanese speaking
Yeah.
audience, but we do have a video that's going to be up on her channel. You guys should go check out. It's going
Yes.
to be really, really fun to listen to. I hope, especially if you guys want more personal stories about me, if that's
Yeah.
something you're missing. I tell two different personal stories I haven't really talked about on my YouTube channel before, so that'll be fun. And again, thank you so much for being here. If you guys have any
Thank you.
comments or questions, anything else, you can put it down in the comment section below, and I will talk to you again soon. Bye.